Imagine this, you're at a party. The music is blasting, people are laughing way too loud at jokes that aren't even funny, and some dude is holding court in the corner bragging about his crypto gains. Everyone's pretending to be impressed, but let's be honest, half the room wants him to choke on his overpriced IPA, and yet, who gets remembered at the end of the night? Not the person who said the smartest thing, not the one who actually listened. Nope. It's Mr. Loudmouth, because in our society, volume equals value. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, that's just how life works, congratulations, you've swallowed the biggest lie society has been feeding you since kindergarten. That being the loudest person in the room makes you the most important. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. In fact, some of the most game-changing people in history weren't the ones screaming into microphones or posting daily rise and grind selfies. They were the quiet ones, the so-called boring ones, the ones you probably ignored while you were busy chasing likes and approval. The book we're about to dig into is Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. Published in 2012, it's not just a self-help book, it's a declaration of war against the cult of extroversion. Susan Cain, a former Wall Street lawyer turned writer, spent years researching psychology, neuroscience, and culture to uncover why our society undervalues introverts and why that bias is not only wrong, but also dangerous. And here's the kicker, she isn't writing this as some detached academic. Cain herself is an introvert who had to fake extroversion just to survive in places like Harvard Law and Wall Street boardrooms. She's lived it. She knows the pressure to smile more, talk more, network harder, and she's here to tell you in painstaking detail why the world needs to shut up for a second and start listening to the quiet voices. Disclaimer, before we go further, this breakdown is transformative commentary. It's for educational purposes only and falls under the Fair Use Act. I'm not here to read you the book word for word. That's plagiarism. What I'm going to do is rip the ideas open, wrestle them into today's context, and call out the nonsense we all live with because we've been brainwashed to worship big personalities. If you like what you hear, go buy Susan Cain's book. Seriously, support the author. But for now, let's expose the hypocrisy. Here's the ugly truth Cain is pointing out. We live in a world addicted to charisma. From corporate boardrooms to elementary school classrooms, the extrovert is treated as the gold standard. Teachers push kids to come out of their shell. Bosses reward the talkers in meetings while ignoring the thinkers. And social media has turned human interaction into a 24/7 audition tape. You're expected to be on all the time because apparently being reflective makes you defective. Cain doesn't just describe this, she dismantles it. She shows us how the extrovert ideal hijacked culture, how it warps education, business, even love, and then she flips the script, pointing out that introverts, the people society sidelines, are often the very ones who produce the deepest ideas, the biggest innovations, and the most meaningful progress. From Rosa Parks to Einstein, from J.K. Rowling to Warren Buffett, history is littered with proof that quiet people change the world. So if you're an introvert who's ever felt like you needed fixing, this book is your ammunition. And if you're an extrovert who thinks being loud makes you a leader, well, buckle up, because Susan Cain, and frankly me too, are about to drag you. Welcome to Mindful Reads Hub. Let's get started. The cult of charisma. We've been conned. For the last 100 years, society has been running the biggest scam imaginable, convincing us that being loud, charming, and endlessly on is the same thing as being valuable. Think about it. Job interviews, they don't hire the person with the best ideas. They hire the person who can fake confidence and crack a joke about golf. Politics, we don't elect the smartest leaders. We elect the ones who can sell us hope like it's a used car. Even dating apps are infected with this disease. It's not about depth. It's about who can write the wittiest one-liner under their profile picture. Charisma has become the currency of worth and silence. Silence has been shoved into the corner like some shameful secret. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when character mattered more than charm. When your value wasn't measured by how many people liked you at a party, but by whether you actually did the right thing when nobody was watching. Back then, People admired honesty, humility, and hard work. Then the 20th century hit and everything changed. Enter Dale Carnegie, skinny farm kid, terrified of public speaking, who reinvented himself into the godfather of charisma. He wasn't born with charm, he manufactured it, packaged it, and sold it back to us like salvation. His books and courses made everyone believe that success depended not on substance, but on how well you could influence people and win friends. Sound familiar? That's because Carnegie didn't just teach self-improvement, he reprogrammed society. This was the birth of what historian Warren Sussman called the culture of personality. Before, you just had to be good. After Carnegie, you had to look good, sound good, be seen as good. It was the dawn of performance living, where every human interaction became an audition and every mistake could be fatal to your image. And once advertising and Hollywood caught wind of it, the transformation was complete. Suddenly, soap wasn't just about cleaning your skin. It was about whether people would like you. Shaving cream wasn't about not bleeding to death in the morning. It was about selling confidence in a bottle. The pressure was no longer just to live, but to impress. And here's where it gets ugly. Once society bought the lie, it started to punish anyone who didn't play the game. The quiet kid in school? Shy, needs to come out of their shell. The introverted employee? Not leadership material. The thinker who needs space instead of spotlight? Doesn't have the right personality. We made charisma the king of all traits, as if smooth talk and a firm handshake are the keys to human greatness. And then we wondered why so many incompetent loudmouths ended up running companies, countries, and entire lives into the ground. Think about the disasters we've had. Economic collapses fueled by overconfident traders high on their own adrenaline. Political movements led by people who could shout slogans louder than anyone else. Corporations built on hype instead of actual value. Cain highlights how charisma, while seductive, is deeply overrated. Studies show that charismatic leaders are often perceived as effective, even when their decisions are reckless or flat out stupid. Why? Because we mistake confidence for competence. It's the same reason a loud guy at the meeting gets credit for an idea someone else quietly suggested 20 minutes earlier. We reward the noise, not the wisdom. And let's be real. This obsession hasn't just poisoned business and politics, it's infected our personal lives. Social media is Carnegie's monster on steroids. He told people to smile more, flatter more, hustle for approval. Instagram tells you the same thing, except now you need filters and hashtags. Carnegie taught the art of selling yourself. TikTok turned it into a religion. The performance never ends. You're not living, you're branding. Here's the punchline. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in human history didn't come from the charismatic. Einstein didn't charm relativity into existence. Rosa Parks didn't start a revolution by giving a rousing speech. She said one quiet word, no, and it shook an empire. Real change doesn't always come from the stage. Sometimes it comes from the corner of the room, from the quiet person who isn't performing but actually thinking. So the next time someone tells you to speak up more or be more outgoing, maybe ask them this: do you want me to make noise or do you want me to make sense? Because those are not the same thing. Key takeaway: society crowned charisma as king and shoved silence into exile. But charisma is a trick, a show. Substance lives in the quiet, and history proves it. Stop worshipping the loudest voice in the room. Start paying attention to the ones who only speak when it matters. Favorite quote: we see ourselves as a nation of extroverts, which means that we've lost sight of who we really are. The death of solitude. We love to brag about teamwork. Schools worship group projects. Companies build open plan offices like they're temples of collaboration. Even apps now gamify every part of life into a community thing. Your playlist has to be shared, your workouts tracked, your thoughts tweeted. We've been sold this fantasy that innovation is born in a crowded room filled with sticky notes, beanbags, and mediocre coffee. That's a lie. It's a comfortable lie, but still a lie. Because the truth is, most of the world's greatest ideas didn't come from a brainstorming session. They came from someone sitting alone, thinking. Susan Cain tears into this myth, and she's right. The evidence is brutal. Groupthink kills creativity. When you shove people together, the loudest ones dominate the conversation, everyone else self-censors, and the room ends up worshipping shallow consensus instead of breakthrough thinking. Schools force kids into pods, telling them to share ideas, but the ones with the deepest insights often shut down because they know the classroom doesn't reward truth, it rewards volume. Officers tell us collaboration is the future, but studies show that workers in open plan layouts are less productive, more stressed, and constantly distracted. Yet companies cling to it because it feels modern. Translation: it looks good in brochures, but here's the uncomfortable part. We've all played along. Why? Because being part of the group is safer than standing apart. You can hide in groupthink. You don't have to risk being wrong. You don't have to risk being disliked. You can just nod, repeat the acceptable idea, and earn approval. It's cowardice disguised as teamwork. And don't get it twisted, this isn't about being introverted versus extroverted. This is about how we've confused noise for progress. Think of history. Einstein didn't discover relativity by attending a workshop with post-it notes. Steve Wozniak didn't invent the first Apple computer at a hackathon. He did it alone in his apartment, tinkering late into the night. J.K. Rowling didn't craft Harry Potter in a collaborative circle. She wrote it in cafes, alone with her thoughts. The myth of the collective brainstorm is a scam. Sure, collaboration has its place, but if you don't give solitude a seat at the table, you're not breeding genius, you're suffocating it. And then there's the obsession with cool. Our culture treats coolness like a virtue, as if detachment and surface charm are worth more than substance. We praise the kid who can crack jokes in class, not the one who's actually thinking. We hire the candidate who presents well, not the one who's prepared the deepest analysis. We worship charisma and we kill curiosity. This isn't just shallow, it's dangerous, because when you prioritize looking good over thinking deeply, you create leaders who are all style and no substance. Ring any bells? Look at the CEOs who tanked their companies because they were too busy chasing buzzwords. Look at politicians who are all slogans, no solutions. Look at influencers selling advice they don't even live by. Cain also shows how introverts often try to adapt, pretending to be extroverts just to survive in the system. And sometimes that's necessary. You can't always say no to the meeting, no to the networking event, no to the group dinner. But here's the key. You shouldn't confuse playing the game with becoming the game. There's a difference between stepping into the spotlight temporarily and believing your worth depends on staying there. When you fake extroversion too long, you risk burning out, losing yourself, forgetting that your best work doesn't come from endless exposure, but from deep focus. So maybe it's time to admit something uncomfortable. Solitude is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Silence isn't weakness, it's power. The world keeps telling us that if we're not seen, we don't exist. That's garbage. Some of the most important revolutions began in silence. Private diaries, long walks, closed doors. Noise can create momentum, but solitude creates meaning, and meaning is what lasts. The next time you feel guilty for wanting to be alone, remember this. Solitude isn't an escape from life, it's where life is processed. Without it, you're not living. You're just reacting, performing for an audience that doesn't care. Key takeaway, collaboration has its place, but worshipping groupthink suffocates originality. Solitude isn't isolation, it's the birthplace of genius. Stop apologizing for stepping away. You're not withdrawing, you're reloading. Favorite quote, some of our greatest ideas, art and inventions, from the theory of evolution to Van Gogh's sunflowers to the personal computer, came from quiet and cerebral people who knew how to tune in to their inner worlds and the treasures to be found there. The science of your nature. Everyone loves to talk about free will, like we're all blank slates who can just decide to be whatever we want. That's cute, but science doesn't agree. You're not a blank slate, you're a cocktail of biology and environment, and that cocktail doesn't always taste the way you want it to. Susan Cain digs into this reality. Some of us are born wired to react strongly to stimulation, others barely flinch at chaos. Some thrive on adrenaline, others feel sick from it. And here's the part most people can't handle. Your temperament, the way your nervous system responds to the world, is baked in from day one. That doesn't mean you're doomed to it, but pretending it doesn't exist is like pretending gravity isn't real because you want to fly. Cain uses research on highly sensitive babies, the ones who cried harder, startled more easily, reacted intensely to the smallest changes. A lot of them grew into introverts, wired to process the world deeply and avoid overstimulation. The kids who barely reacted at all often leaned toward extroversion, thriving in fast, noisy environments. This isn't personality fluff, it's neurology. And yet, what does society tell these kids? Toughen up, get louder, be more outgoing. Translation, ignore your wiring, betray yourself, and maybe you'll get invited to the party. Here's the problem, ignoring biology backfires. You see it in Wall Street traders during the crash. The high dopamine extroverts chased risks like addicts, convinced the ride would never end, while quieter, more deliberate thinkers like Warren Buffett held back, asked boring questions like, what if this collapses, and ended up winning. Risk takers are sexy when they're winning. They look like idiots when the house burns down, but our culture still glamorizes them because flash is easier to sell than restraint. But temperament isn't destiny, and this is where choice enters. Yes, your biology whispers, but your choices shout. You can stretch beyond your wiring, step into roles that don't feel natural, as long as you respect your limits. Introverts can give powerful speeches, they just need recovery time after. Extroverts can focus deeply, they just need to fight their instinct to chase constant stimulation. The real mistake is assuming you have to become someone else entirely. That's like a fish deciding to climb trees because monkeys seem popular. You can adapt, but if you deny who you are, you drown. And here's the confrontational part. Most of us are lying to ourselves about who we are. We post curated versions online, we swallow growth mindset mantras, and we treat our wiring like a bug we can debug. But it's not a bug, it's an operating system. Your biology sets parameters. Your choices decide how you play within them. That means knowing when to lean into your nature and when to stretch. It's not about becoming louder, braver, bolder all the time. It's about being strategic with your energy. Warren Buffett didn't get rich because he forced himself to be an adrenaline junkie. He got rich because he doubled down on being cautious while everyone else was high on dopamine. That's the lesson. Stop betraying your nature because someone told you confidence is sexy. Sexy doesn't pay the bills when the system collapses. So let's stop pretending everyone can be everything. Some of you are wired to sprint, others to endure. Some thrive in noise, others in silence. Both are strengths when you stop trying to be what you're not. The real power is knowing your nature so well that you can bend it when necessary without breaking it. That's not weakness, that's mastery. Key takeaway, your biology shapes your tendencies, but your choices shape your destiny. Stop betraying your wiring to fit society's obsession with charisma and risk. Power comes from knowing your nature, not faking someone else's. Favorite quote, our lives are shaped as profoundly by personality as by gender or race. The quiet rebels. We love to mistake volume for impact. If someone talks a lot, we assume they know what they are saying. If someone talks less, we assume they don't. That's how warped our instincts are. We've been trained to equate noise with strength, when in reality, the most powerful voices in history are often the ones that barely spoke. Susan Cain shows this contrast perfectly through Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin, the archetype of charisma, had the booming voice, the backslapping charm, the ability to make you feel like the only person in the room. He sold optimism during the Great Depression, and people adored him for it. But it was Eleanor, quiet, awkward, and introverted, who challenged him in private, who raised the uncomfortable truths, who carried a moral backbone strong enough to influence American politics from the shadows. She wasn't cool, she wasn't loud, and yet she was the one constantly bending history in ways Franklin couldn't, or wouldn't. This is what Cain calls soft power. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us have been conditioned to dismiss soft power because it doesn't look sexy. It doesn't dominate a stage, it doesn't sell tickets, it doesn't trend on TikTok. But soft power is what actually moves the needle over time. It's Rosa Parks sitting down when she was told to move. It's Gandhi choosing hunger instead of violence. It's immigrants who barely speak the language, yet change culture through persistence, through resilience, through quiet defiance. But because soft power doesn't photograph well, we worship the louder figures and forget who kept them honest. And this addiction to noise is why we constantly misread communication. We assume someone who speaks smoothly is trustworthy, but research Cain highlights shows otherwise. Extroverts are often judged as more competent simply because they're talkative, even when they're dead wrong. Introverts hesitate, pause, choose their words, which makes them sound unsure, even when their ideas are better. It's a rigged game. Society punishes the careful and rewards the reckless. And then we act surprised when our leaders crash economies or make catastrophic decisions. Newsflash: we trained ourselves to follow volume, not vision. But here's where it gets personal. Think about your own life. How many times have you dismissed someone just because they didn't sound confident enough? How many times have you written off a friend, a coworker, even yourself, because the words didn't come wrapped in a shiny bow of charisma? That's not an accident. That's decades of cultural programming telling you that speaking less means meaning less, which is garbage. The people who speak less often usually mean it more when they finally do. But we've built a world where silence has to fight twice as hard to be heard. And let's call this out directly. This obsession with cool, with effortless charm, is killing us. Cool is the biggest scam of all. Cool tells you not to care too much, not to try too hard, not to show too much. But progress has never come from people who were too cool to care. Progress comes from the awkward ones who cared so deeply they were willing to look uncool, willing to speak up when it was uncomfortable, willing to act when everyone else was watching. You want to know why the world feels hollow sometimes? Because we keep putting cool people in charge of warm problems. So the quiet rebels are the ones we should be paying attention to. They're the immigrant kid translating documents for their parents while politicians argue about policy. They're the colleague who barely speaks in meetings but has the one idea that saves the project. They're the Eleanor Roosevelts, the unsung backbones who don't need applause to do what's right. If you're one of them, stop apologizing for not being louder. Your silence is not weakness, it's strategy. And when you finally choose to speak, the world has no choice but to listen. Key takeaway: quiet doesn't mean powerless. The ones who speak less often are often the ones carrying the deepest strength. Soft power shapes revolutions, even if it doesn't trend on Instagram. Stop mistaking silence for absence. It's usually the calm before the breakthrough. Favorite quote: there's zero correlation between being the best talker and having the best ideas. Raising lions in a world of hyenas. We live in a world that keeps mistaking noise for strength, and nowhere is that more toxic than in how we raise kids. Schools don't grade on curiosity or depth of thought. They grade on how much a child raises their hand. Parents panic when their kid isn't the loudest in the room, as if silence means broken. Teachers label quiet kids as shy or antisocial, while the loud ones are praised as leaders, even when half the time their leadership is just bossiness with better PR. The message is clear. If you're not barking like a hyena, you'll get eaten alive. Susan Cain dismantles this nonsense with research, but let's not sugarcoat it. We've built an education system designed for extroverts. Group projects, participation grades, constant noise. Imagine being a kid who processes deeply, who thrives in solitude, who needs time to think before speaking. The system treats that as a flaw, not a strength. And what's worse, parents often reinforce it, shoving their kids into more activities, more social clubs, more opportunities to get out of their shell, when in reality, the shell is their strength. You don't grow lions by forcing them to act like hyenas. You grow lions by teaching them to trust their nature, by giving them space to sharpen their quiet power until it's undeniable. And here's the irony. When quiet kids are allowed to lean into who they are, they often end up being the strongest leaders. Cain cites research showing introverted leaders tend to deliver better outcomes, especially when managing proactive teams. Why? Because they listen. They don't bulldoze. They create space for others to contribute. Extroverted leaders, in contrast, can smother initiative by being too forceful. That means all those quiet kids being told they don't have leadership potential are actually sitting on the very traits that make leadership work. But the culture doesn't see it because we're too addicted to the illusion of charisma. Now let's get confrontational. If you're a parent or teacher who tells quiet kids to speak up more without teaching loud kids to shut up more, you're part of the problem. What you're really saying is that volume equals value, and that's a lie. Some of the greatest revolutions weren't shouted, they were whispered. Some of the strongest people in history weren't the ones who could dominate a room, but the ones who refused to bend when it mattered. By forcing quiet kids to mimic extroversion 24/7, you're not helping them grow. You're teaching them to betray themselves. And betrayal leaves scars. Cain acknowledges that sometimes, yes, acting extroverted is necessary. Life demands it. There are moments when the quiet kid has to speak in front of a class, pitch an idea, stand their ground, but that's not the same as erasing their nature. The goal isn't to make them extroverts, it's to help them flex without breaking, to know when to roar and when to retreat. That's what raising lions looks like. And if you don't get this right, you end up raising people who spend their adult lives drained, ashamed, or convinced they're defective just because they weren't wired for noise. And let's be brutally honest, the future doesn't belong to the loudest. Noise is cheap. Everyone's shouting online. Everyone's posting hot takes. Everyone's fighting for attention like starving animals. That's not power. That's desperation. Real influence belongs to the ones who can step back, process, and deliver something meaningful when everyone else is busy scrambling. The future belongs to the kids who can listen deeply, who can think independently, who don't need to scream to matter. That's not weakness, that's evolution. So maybe the real rebellion is to stop trying to raise kids who can survive in a world of hyenas and start raising kids who will grow into lions. Because lions don't need to prove they're powerful, they just are. Key takeaway: forcing quiet kids to act like extroverts doesn't build strength, it builds self-betrayal. True power comes when kids learn to trust their quiet nature and use it strategically. Raise listeners, not just talkers. Favorite quote: don't think of introversion as something that needs to be cured. Wonderland, the final awakening. We live in a culture that's terrified of silence. Watch what happens in a meeting when no one talks for 5 seconds. The panic sets in, someone blurts something out just to fill the void, and suddenly everyone's nodding along to garbage because God forbid we sit in quiet long enough to think. But silence isn't empty, it's loaded. Silence is where you actually figure things out. And yet, as Susan Cain shows, we've built societies that treat silence as a weakness and volume as strength. We don't ask, what's right? We ask, who said it loudest? That's how civilizations make stupid decisions. Cain points out cultural contrasts that expose just how ridiculous this obsession with noise is. In America, the loudest person in the room gets the microphone. In East Asian cultures, it's the opposite. Restraint, humility, listening are prized. That's why classrooms in China might feel painfully quiet to Western teachers. But to those students, silence isn't awkward, it's respect. And let's be real, if America's speak first, think later culture was truly superior, we wouldn't keep crashing economies, electing narcissists, or mistaking salesmen for visionaries. Noise has become our drug of choice, and the withdrawals look ugly. And this addiction isn't just cultural, it's biological. Cain unpacks the dopamine system. Extroverts are wired to chase stimulation, to ride the high of novelty and risk. Introverts, less so. They're more sensitive, more easily overstimulated. Which one is better? Neither. But try telling that to a world that thinks the person jumping off cliffs is always braver than the person calculating how deep the water is first. Extroverts get called daring. Introverts get called boring. Yet when the fallout comes, financial collapse, failed projects, broken systems, it's the so-called boring ones who saw it coming. That's not boring, that's survival. Here's where the confrontation comes in. Most of us are cowards hiding behind noise. We equate loudness with certainty because if someone talks with enough confidence, it saves us from having to think for ourselves. It's easier to follow the booming voice than to wrestle with the quiet truth. But if history teaches us anything, it's that the booming voices often lead us off cliffs, while the quiet ones are the only reason we make it back up. Stop outsourcing your judgment to whoever shouts the hardest. That's not leadership, that's laziness. Cain ends by reminding us that the revolution isn't about everyone becoming quieter or louder, it's about balance, about giving introverts and extroverts space to bring their strengths without pretending one is superior. But let's be clear, this isn't some kumbaya, everyone's special nonsense. The stakes are higher than that. If we keep rewarding charisma over competence, flash over substance, we're going to keep raising hyenas instead of lions, and hyenas don't build civilizations, they pick at the bones of them. The awakening Cain points to isn't about finding comfort in noise, it's about daring to stay quiet in a world that's allergic to it. And if you think that sounds soft, good, underestimate it. Because silence doesn't need to flex, it always wins in the long run. So the next time you walk into a room and feel the pressure to speak up just to prove you belong, remember this: the loudest person isn't always the strongest, the most confident isn't always the most competent, and silence doesn't mean absence, it means focus. Maybe the future doesn't belong to the noisiest at all. Maybe it belongs to the ones listening while everyone else is too busy shouting. Key takeaway: the final power move isn't getting louder. It's daring to stay quiet in a world addicted to noise. True strength is restraint, not desperation. Favorite quote: there's a word for people who are in their heads too much. Thinkers. Conclusion. We've just walked through the noise and the silence, the myths and the truths, the charisma cults and the quiet rebellions. And if you haven't gotten the message by now, let me put it plain. The world's obsession with loudness has been a scam. 100-year marketing campaign convincing you that volume equals value, that confidence equals competence, and that silence equals weakness. But history, psychology, and your own damn life keep proving the opposite. We crowned extroverts as kings, and then wondered why our kingdoms kept burning. We killed solitude and then cried when our creativity died with it. We told ourselves biology was destiny, but forgot that choice is the pen that rewrites it. We ignored the quiet rebels, the Elinors, the Parks, the Gandhis, while cheering for the Franklins and the salesmen who knew how to talk but not how to listen. We raised kids like hyenas, rewarding them for barking instead of thinking, and then acted shocked when they grew up to be hollow adults addicted to applause. And through it all, silence was waiting. Misunderstood, underrated, but undefeated. Cain's book isn't just research, it's a mirror, and if you didn't flinch, you weren't paying attention. Because here's the truth: every time you dismiss someone for not talking enough, every time you pressure a kid to fake extroversion, every time you confuse noise for strength, you're not just making a small mistake. You're helping build a world that's dumber, shallower, and more fragile than it has to be. And maybe that's why the world feels so damn loud right now, because it's compensating for how empty it's become. But there's another way. You don't need to outshout the crowd, you need to outlisten them. You don't need to always speak, you need to know when silence is the sharpest weapon. And you don't need to betray your wiring to fit in with a culture that doesn't even know what it wants. Because the revolution isn't about being louder, it's about daring to stay quiet in a world that's terrified of it. So if you're someone who's been told you're too quiet, too reserved, too awkward, good, stay that way. You're the one with the potential to change the damn game. And if you're someone who's been addicted to noise, maybe it's time to shut up long enough to hear what's actually going on inside your own head. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs depth. It needs thought. It needs the courage of silence. And look, this breakdown only scratches the surface. Susan Cain's Quiet is stacked with research, stories, and examples I didn't even get to. If you care about how we raise kids, how we build companies, how we choose leaders, or even how you understand yourself, read it. Don't just skim the highlights, actually sit down with the book, buy it, mark it up, wrestle with it. This isn't just a book about introverts, it's a book about what we've all been missing because we're too damn loud to notice. So here's the challenge. The next time you walk into a room, don't ask yourself how you can be the loudest. Ask yourself how you can be the most meaningful, because noise fades. But meaning echoes. Now if you got value from this, you know what to do. Hit the button, share this with the loudest person you know. Maybe they need it more than you. And most of all, go pick up Quiet. Because the world doesn't get better by making more noise. It gets better by finally listening.